What's going on, everybody? Gunnar here. Today we are going to do the Mega Jerk tutorial, and something that you can look at real quick. This is the first one I ever tied, which was not too long ago, and you can kind of see these straight cuts. And what happened was I built it with basically any one of my brushes, and the fibers up front were too long, and so I had to trim it to create the right profile. And so I'm going to try to spare you from that by showing you guys the custom brush that I came up with so that it's absolutely seamless and perfectly proportioned for you. So basically all you have to do is palmer the brush. What you're looking at, this is SF fiber. I have this cut to 4 inches in length, 2.5 inches in length, and this is what's left over. So if you take it at full length, this is just one section at full length. This is the remainder. It's about 1.5 inches. I'm going to spread these out. Now I like to leave this last little bit empty. We're actually going to put big fly fiber here without SF at all. So what you're going to end up with when we're done, this is going to be your tail brush, this is going to be your head brush, and you end up with a perfect section to tie imposters, allsparks, and the tail of a critter getter. So you actually get a freebie out of this brush. Now you're going to come in with big fly fiber. This is cut just short of where the curl ends. This is the maximum length you can get out of a regular piece of big fly fiber. And I'm just going to drape it 50-50 over top of this SF. Now that these two are full up of the white, I'm actually going to cut 2 full inches off of this. And this is where part of the taper comes from. The taper comes from building the base but reducing the wing fiber. And that's how you get away with building a bulkier fly that you don't have to trim at the end. Now I want this front to fade into a chartreuse black. So I'm going to keep the white kind of in the back half and rely on the other colors to fill up the front of the brush. Now I'm basically going to do the same thing, full length in the back, cut 2 inches off in the front, but with different colors. Now, here is the trick to making this work the best. So we're building the length of the core, which is going to build the density of the brush. But the problem is we need some stiffer fibers to help create the bulk and the push of water that we want, so that when you strip it, the fly swims, and when you stop it, it jerks off to the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the curly section from the big fly fiber that we didn't use, and we're going to add it to the last 1.5 inches of this brush to create our nice stiff bulk. And since this is kind of all trapped together, I'm just going to open that up a little bit, get it nice and thick. It's a little bit long for my taste. Trim that down just a little bit, and then I'm just going to lay that right here. Now this looks a little crazy, right? We have really sparse, getting thicker, really thick core, but what you have to remember is this brush twists more up front, less down below, so we have more pressure up front on more material, and it holds and is an extremely durable brush. So don't worry too much about that. Now I'm going to come in with some subtle ice wing fiber, just to add some flash accents, because the fly itself does not have any additional flash. It's all synthetic, straight saturation, kind of a profile bug instead of a flashy-boo bug. So this is your flash. So go as heavy or as light as you like to go. So I got it picked out the best I can with this nice big comb, and I'm going to come in with the slicker brush, which I got from In Pursuit of Trout, and I'm just going to get in deep into the core and pull it off to the side. And that seems to get the most trapped fibers out. Instead of running it up and down in the same direction, which I'll do, it gets the knots out faster if you pull off to the side, because it's freeing off. The fibers fall into each other when you spin it, and so pulling it one way only helps half of the knot. So by getting it deep and then pulling it off to the side, you free up kind of both tangles at the same time. And you'll know that you spun this up correctly when your brush has nothing in it, basically. It should just have a few strands of flash, or maybe some big fly fiber that got looped and you're ripping it out, like physically ripping the big fly fiber. Because what can happen is when you spin these brushes, you can physically spin the wire too tight. This is size large dubbing brush wire from Uni. If you spin it too tight, it's just like tying in rubber legs too tight, right? You compromise that material, and instead of slipping or pulling, it physically breaks. So you don't want to overspin. I find that about full compression on the spring on my device is right where I want to be, and not really any farther. And that's tight enough to hold everything in place, make a nice durable brush, but it's not going to break your materials. What's going on, everybody? So we're going to sit down and tie the Mega Jerk. So this is the brush that's in the video that I just did for you guys. I feel like, because I haven't tied a bajillion of these yet, that was maybe 10% too much big fly fiber. It has a little too much for me. I like them. The first few I tied were a little bit sparser. So I'm going to redo this video for you. I just remade a brush, and what I want you to see real quick is when you take this brush, this being the thick end, you should be able to basically put eyes on this and fish it. Like, do you see that silhouette? When you build that custom taper, the 1 inch, the 3 inch, the 4 inch, shortening your big fly fiber from about 8 inches up to maybe 5 inches or so, you really create the perfect silhouette. And that's what we're going to palmer, right? You get this silhouette when you palmer this brush, basically. And so that's what you're looking for when it's all said and done. And so, yeah, I guess I'm going to try to do this video a little bit shorter and sweeter than most of them. So I'll throw in a few tips here and there, but it's mostly the same recipe as the Super Jerk, scaled up, and you just swap the materials out, right? So for your tail material, we're going to have Glisten Glint, which is a Deer Creek synthetic fiber. It's really supple, right? And you can use Steve Farrar blend, but I think it has too much curl and wavy. It's a 3D fiber, right? And you kind of want a straight synthetic for the tail, in my opinion. And then we're going to use the Steve Farrar blend later on to do kind of like a little flashback. So I like the Deer Creek Glisten Glint for the tail. We're obviously going to run the brush, and then we're going to have a Deer Creek Glisten Glint collar, or I guess wing material. And then the front hook is going to be the brush, wing material top and bottom, and then a dubbing head. So it's really straightforward. It's almost identical to a Super Jerk. You just swap out the materials, hence Mega Jerk. Now, real quickly, there's a friend of mine on Instagram. His name is Matt Holmes. I believe his Instagram account is Matt J, maybe Matt79J. Apologize if I got that wrong. But he ties some really slick pike flies. And I was curious how he builds his bulk, because I'd use brushes and stuff. And he told me that he had a curly fiber similar to big fly fiber, and that's what he used to ramp his materials off of. And so this section of big fly fiber curl that's in this brush to build bulk, I really got the idea from Matt. So props to Matt, and just giving credit to him for that. So before we just kind of whip this fly off, the back hook is a 2-aught light predator stinger from Arex. I'm going to use a barbless in the video. You can use the barb if you want. And the front is a 6-aught predator stinger. And the light stinger is going to be ideal because it's obviously a lighter wire hook. That brush is going to push a ton of water, and so that light wire is going to have a lot more movement to it than a heavy wire hook. It's also an extra large gap. The light predators have a larger gap than the predators. And it's also a really long shank compared to a lot of other brands. So you basically have a really light, long shank, which is going to give us our silhouette and basically a place to build that brush. And it has a nice wide gap. And then the 6-aught front I wanted a nice heavy wire hook to help slip that bug under the surface as soon as it lands, and this has a really long kind of moment arm around the back balance point, which helps sink that head underwater so it starts catching currents, because it's a really vertical head, right? So as soon as you can sink that head under, it just starts digging and diving, which is really ideal. And then obviously it has a really good keel, putting all your materials on top and using that for your center. It holds keel perfectly and gives you a nice jerk instead of the tendency to flip on its side in heavy current. So that's why we got the 6/0 Predator up front, 2/0 Light Predator in the back. Both of those are AREX models, and we're going to get started. So the tail is Deer Creek Glisten Glint. I'm tying these fibers in at their full material length. I currently have my thread stopped at the hook point, and you can see the shank has already started to diving down. And what I want to show you is I'm going to tie these fibers in 30, 70, 30 going off the back first to give us our shorter belly, 70 going over top to give us our longer back. And what I'm going to do is simply run that down a few turns, and then I'm going to put, you can use micro lateral line flash from Hedron is what something I do very often. I'm going to use this time though it's Mirage Flashaboo and just mirror opal. So it's a really transparent, super flashy, highly reflective, supple flash fiber, basically. And just taper that, and I'm going to put that on these thread stacks so that it's inside the tail. Now, because we're on the downward angle of this hook bend, you want to take your thread. Am I doing this correct? I think so. Oh yeah. So we're going from the thread bump, below the thread bump, underneath the material. And you want to do probably 3 good hard wraps. And what's that going to do is it's going to lift that material off the shank, keep it nice and level in the center line of the hook. And I fished one of these for maybe 2 hours the other day and never had it foul once. So it's fairly foul proof, and that'll stay right where it is the entire time you're fishing. So we're just going to tie in our brush now. You want to use, you want about 2 wraps of that 3-inch core, that 2.5-inch core, to get a nice silhouette on this hook. So when you're cutting this brush, you want to make sure that you get your no core, your 1-inch core, and then maybe a 1/4 inch or so of that 2.5-inch core, so that you really build a nice fusiform silhouette with the brush on the back hook. And what you're left with is I cut the tail off and I cut the head off, and you have a perfect sized brush for allsparks, imposters, and the tail of a critter getter. So you get a free brush out of that. So you have a really nice proportion, fusiform tail section, and we're just going to put a sparse glisten glint wing on the back. I like it to go about the length of the big fly fiber. I don't like it to go all the way back, and it's that simple. That's the back hook on that. I'm going to explain how I like to tie this in, basically so I won't have to when we get to the front. But something that's really nice to be able to do is you're going to want to control the silhouette of this bug, especially in the head section, to maximize the action that it gets. So when you tie this in, I like to distribute the back so that it's nice and it overlays the width of that back. So it almost comes down completely over the top half of that hook. You see that? So it's very, the back stack is very widely distributed, and then the front stack is going to stay right on top, and that's going to help build a vertical. Obviously that doesn't look very good, but when you get to the front, you really want that to create that vertical kind of sail, and by doing the back like well distributed and then the front narrow distributed, you start to build that vertical sail into the winging material instead of just the head. So I don't know if you could see that or not, but I basically dragged my vise around the table because I put so much pressure on that brush. I really like to make sure it's nice and tight to the shank. And so what you have here is when I held up that brush, you could see the silhouette, right? You could see the long blending into the bulky, getting a little bit shorter, and it makes a really nice hollow fibe. But because we took out that middle section, there's a little gap of fibers that aren't here. And so it kind of looks like it's fat and it's skinny and there's nothing in between. And basically what you're going to use is the wing material from the Glisten Glint and the Steve Farrar blend to bridge that gap and create the fusiform profile that we're missing from having taken out the center of the brush, which technically would have gone where the articulation is, right? So that's how that's going to work. And what I like to do is I like to do Glisten Glint top and bottom, about 60, 40, 50, 50. And then I like to do a very sparse layer of Peacock SF blend. And this is just a super fishy color for a back blend, and we'll tie them in separately. Before we jumped on, I wanted to get Matt Holmes' Instagram right. It's Matt79JH. So if you want to go check him out, he's got some really slick pike and perch patterns that are pretty badass, and that's what the big fly fiber in the brush is inspired by. It's by his pike fly. So I'm going to throw some super glue right there, and then we'll get some Glisten Glint on this guy. So because we have really long fibers bleeding into this head, I need to maximize the length of the monster dub. So the first stacks, top and bottom, are going to be tied 70-30. I guess my hand was in the wrong direction there. 70-30 to maximize the length. And then the front stack, the stack that's going to go in front of that, is going to be tied in 50-50 to bleed into the 70-30, but also to create enough volume to cover over the eyes. And we're going to shape that with a UV Deer Creek diamond fine. Now, one of the reasons why I'm not doing that full epoxy head is because this is a really big eye, which has a lot of surface area for that tear mender to work on, and it's forgiving. It's not necessarily a necessary step on this size of pattern, and that we're going to come in with the UV resin at the end to really shape that dubbing and make sure it has a nice tall head. So you just want to saturate this completely. I've been doing a little too much, but you do what you want. Put this one on. And the only trick is I like to keep my eyes really close to the hook eye. You can move them back a little bit if you want. But once I get these eyes on here, I'm going to pull up on that dubbing just a little bit and make sure it's really flared vertically to really help emphasize that sail. The sail that's going to catch our water and give it the jerk bait action, right? So now that it's on there, you kind of pinch these together and really make sure it has a good vertical kind of orientation and displacement to it so that we can control all of those fibers with the UV resin. Just making sure it looks good before I show you the finished product. But that is a mega jerk. It's about 10.5, almost 11 inches long. Again, a 2-aught light predator, 6-aught predator, stinger hooks from Arex hooks. All synthetic except for the a pack of fibers in the monster dub, and it's a super fishy, really slick bug. Can cast it all day on a 10 weight, no problem. Sheds water like a dream. Has a really intense cutting action because of those 15 millimeter eyes and the way you stack the dubbing and the winging material. So hopefully you enjoyed it, tied some up. The brush it's really easy to make, and it makes the tying process really fast and simple, and you get a free brush out of it for other flies. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. If you have any questions, let them rip. Hopefully I'll get back to you. If I don't, remind me, because yeah, I should. And so yeah, the Mega Jerk. Check it out on the website, and you know, if you like tying them yourself, give it a go. Thanks for watching. See ya.